The FujiCast is an independent loading zone production.
Monday, 18th of May.
The FujiCast.
Welcome to the FujiCast, the once weekly, now daily photographic show, which I know has the title FujiCast, but we talk about all kinds of photography, all kinds of cameras, and of course during this period where some people are locked down and some people are a little bit freer, it's a community of photographers and a chance for you to ask questions and just say what's going on in your life. Hello, Kev.
Hello.
I know today's going to be a very precious episode for you because you're very keen on Martin Parr and his work, and we've talked about Martin many times on this podcast, haven't we?
Yeah, loads of times. I think in the reference index he pops up loads of times.
Does he have the record yet on the most people mentioned? Probably close to.
I'm not sure. Yeah, you see, typically on the reference index, I don't give, every time we mention somebody, I don't give them a reference point, if you like, because that we'd have so much on there. It's only when it's a prolonged conversation or we talk about a book or something.
Well, we've certainly talked about Martin's books in the past. That's for sure. But have you got much of a... Now, you know that I know who Martin is. Of course I do. I haven't followed him in quite the same way that you have. Though I understand his importance to British photography. That's clear. But you're a bit of a book collector, and you have a good few Martin Parr books, don't you?
Oh yeah, I've got loads. In fact, I've got another couple on order right now.
Have you?
Yeah, I mean, I think with Martin, it's even if people have never heard of him or are unaware of him, I'm guessing they will have seen his pictures,
Absolutely.
Even if they're not photographers, because his pictures are paramount to kind of British history and have been used wide and far in lots of journals, magazines, BBC documentaries, all kinds of stuff. So I think people generally will be aware of him.
How important has he been in terms of street work and the kind of work that you absolutely adore? Yeah,
I think with Martin Parr, there's a difference between his work and the more, I guess, what I would now call the hipster, trendy street photography, the kind of gritty in your face and YouTube styley, kind of cameras, selfie cameras, and filming yourself getting up close and personal with people. Of course, he's been doing that for years and years and years, but without that I suppose he was a hipster once, but now I would guess he's kind of a statesman, if you like, of it all. But I think when you look at or certainly when I look at his pictures anyway, I look at them in kind of wonder, really, and think, wow, look, it's just people being people, just normal people being normal. And the curiosity we have as photographers, I think he can go ahead and capture that curiosity in a frame very well. And certainly the British element of things, amazing. I love it.
Now, I know you're going to mention the foundation. Of course you are within the interview itself. But tell me, because you're a member of the Martin Parr Foundation, tell me a little bit more about it. What actually it is, and what you feel you benefit from it.
I suppose before I tell you what it is, it's more about why he's done something like this, I guess. And I suppose a lot of photographers do this as they move through their lives. There's a huge archive of content that, heaven forbid, things pop off the mortal coil and all that kind of stuff, that you want that to be well looked after. But the foundation itself is more than just Martin Parr's work. There's all kinds of stuff there. I mean, we had Ian Weldon on, didn't we, a few months back, and his work's been exhibited there. Yeah. There's a library of books from all over the place, although I think, as Martin mentions in the interview, a lot of his collection has gone to the British Library. He has running exhibitions. It's great. It's just a place that you can just go and be engrossed with photography and the things around it. And of course, so as a member of the foundation, you get various different things. You're going to get exhibitions, first looks at exhibitions. You're going to get access to talks by Martin, all of those various things. And, we're not here to kind of sell membership to the foundation, but I think it's a very worthwhile cause, mostly because of the archival nature of it. I think it's really, really important.
Kev, what was it like actually? I mean, I know you're a huge admirer of Martin Parr, and I know myself, having been an interviewer and in music radio originally, and speaking to people that I really revere, people like Elton John and characters like that I was always told, be on their same level and all that sort of stuff. But it all goes out the window when you're talking to somebody that you really admire, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does, yeah. Although I suspect kind of the difference between people like Elton John and, Martin Parr in terms of their personality, I think will probably be quite substantial.
Yes. Yeah.
I don't know, of course, I never met Elton John. But
I don't know. I don't know whether Martin plays, but I'm not quite sure what he's like on the piano either. I think Elton can't take a picture for toffee.
So I've met Martin a few times, but I've just been a general punter in the audience, watching him do presentations and talks and stuff. So when I first contacted him via the foundation to see if he would come on the podcast, I sent him a picture that was a picture that him signing a book of mine, although it was it was at a bakery in Bristol. And that's kind of the Martin Parr thing, isn't it? I think his local bakery in Bristol, that's the place he's going to launch his next photo book. This was a couple of years ago. There was maybe 20, 25 people there. We all had a scone and a glass of champagne or something, and walked away with our signed books. Brilliant. And that's the kind of personality I suspect he's got. I mean, I obviously don't know him, and I guess, when you do an interview with somebody that, and I've always been conscious of this as a photographer, I hate, I'm not elevating myself in any way, shape or form, but I hate it when people say, send me emails and things and say, I saw you at a workshop and I was a bit too nervous to come and say hello. Yeah. To me, that just does not make any sense whatsoever. I think in the world of photography, yes, we all know different people and have different understandings of their success and kind of the echelons that they've reached, but really walk down the street and what you're going to do if David Bailey walked down the street and 99% of the people wouldn't recognize him, and I'm sure the case is the same for Martin Parr, but inside the industry, it's huge, isn't it? And you speak to your people. I hate the word fans. I hate that word. But people. Well,
your followers, your fans. I mean, it's modern parlance, isn't it? Really?
Yeah, you're right. But I just, it's like the word zine. Just things like that.
Don't get you started.
Anyway, but you get to speak to these people, and you do have to kind of normalize things. And it was great. He's just a regular person, and he was really kind to come on the podcast because I know that he probably gets asked to do lots of different things, and I kind of said to him, look, we're doing this daily thing, we're doing it for the community, can you help us out? And he went, yeah, of course I can. And so he did.
Right, I think we should actually hear it then. This is Kevin talking to Martin Parr.
First of all, I suppose it seems like the norm thing to say these days is how are you, and how are you doing in these very weird times?
Yeah, I'm doing fine. I'm a bit frustrated, of course, because I love photographing people, and although there are people around, it's not quite the same. All the events which I love to go to have gone, but I'm making the most of it. We're busy at the foundation, catching up with the archiving, reading books that I haven't read before, going through contacts. So I'm being usefully employed. It is slightly frustrating, nonetheless.
It's the same for everybody, isn't it? But I suppose I don't know. Maybe it sounds a little bit like you've managed to kind of pull things out of the hat and get onto the top of your to-do list, if you like.
Yeah.
It's interesting actually, because obviously I'm a member of the foundation, and we get sent these little clips of you talking about some of your famous or favorite photo books, I should say. Mm-hmm. And I was watching one the other day. I think it was Horacio Capello's book, Buenos, and you were saying that he was something like 100 years old when you met him to sign that book.
103, something crazy.
Wow.
Or 96, I can't remember. It was near 100 anyway.
That particular book obviously is pretty special, and at the foundation you've got many books of many different photographers, but I suppose a lot of people know you for your kind of study of British culture and the British people, if you like, but the books specifically I think are really interesting to me and to our listeners, because we speak a lot about photo books, and I'm always telling people, buy more books, and look at them and keep them. And the thing for me about photography specifically, and this is something that, I'd like to get your thoughts on, is this idea that pictures, I suppose pictures that you might take today might seem almost mundane, but in the future, whether that's 10, 5, 10, 15, 20 years in the time, that they then become nostalgic, right? And I think that's really the power of those photo books.
No, absolutely. So there's two things here. First, of course, you're right. I'm a great believer in photography books. I've done over 100 myself. I had a massive collection which has gone to the Tate, although, as you can see, I've still rebought some of the other books and collected some of these too. And you're absolutely right. There's a great value in documentary photography, and often things that appear mundane now become much more interesting in years to come. And that's one of the great powers of documentary photography. I mean, even down to things like, how we lay out our house. When we redecorate, we should always try and photograph the house, because it's amazing to look back as to how we used to have even our own environments in years to come. It's always fascinating. And all our cars, all these things like this that people wouldn't even think about really photographing are very valuable material.
Right at the beginning, I guess you started off with the was it kind of like the Hebden Bridge project, I guess, when you were up there, and I suppose to a certain extent things like the nonconformists were the black and white style, and then there's this huge change in aesthetic to the more kind of colourful look. Now, was that I often wonder whether that was down to technological changes or just that you wanted to do something different that perhaps everybody else was doing, or
there's a few things. I mean, first, we began to see colour photography being taken seriously in America with people like Eggerton, Stephen Shaw and such like. And then Peter Mitchell had this very impressive show at the Impressions Gallery in York in 1979. And I think by then, when they introduced this new medium format camera, I thought, well, I'll get one of these and try it, and I'll change the colour at the same time. So it all fell into place in the early 80s, and it was 82 when I got that camera. And indeed, that was the same year I started the Last Resort project.
I think I read somewhere that you said you had this love-hate relationship with, I'm not sure whether Britain is the right word, or Britishness, or the class culture, I guess, perhaps. Is that true to say?
Absolutely. I mean, it's. I think of photography as a form of therapy, and I love this country, but there are things about it that I don't like, and I'm able, if you like, to express that contradiction through photography. It's one of the things I'm looking for, is the ability to have that ambiguity, actually shown as a single picture, and that keeps me going and keeps me sort of on my toes, if you like.
I remember seeing you. I think the last time I saw you was at the bakery in Bristol, and I remember you said somebody asked you a question, and it was something like, "What's your favourite picture?" And I think you said something along the lines of, that's like asking an author what their favourite page in a book was.
Did I say that?
Yeah, and that really struck a chord with me, because I thought, yeah, actually, that makes a lot of sense, because, a project, if you like, a series of pictures is a series of pictures. And I don't know, is that still your thinking on that?
I mean, it's difficult to single out individual pictures, but if I had to put one project together, it'd still be The Last Resort, which is a bit weird given the fact that it was taken over 35 years ago. But nonetheless, it sort of launched my career as a photographer, I guess, certainly beyond the UK. And we're on the 8th or 9th edition now, and it keeps selling a couple of thousand copies every year. So I have nothing to complain about.
I was looking at the website earlier at some of the photo books, and of course you've got lots of photo books on there from other photographers as well. But your, the first editions and the second editions and third editions, and you can see the price difference of the older editions, which I think is really interesting. And that led me to look up what I suppose it's quite a rare book of yours called Cherry Blossom Time in Tokyo.
It is quite a rare one. You're absolutely right. It was an album, in fact, if I remember correctly. So yeah, it has real photos in. So it's as much like an artist's book as a book itself.
Now, I remember, because obviously you're in Bristol, which is not too far away from Cheltenham, and when was the last time you were at the Cheltenham races? I think the ones on Magnum Foundation were 2016.
Something like that. Yeah, I thought about going this year, but in fact I was put off, so I did think it would be dangerous, and it turned out to be the case. So yeah, it's one of those things. It's not far from me to go from Bristol, so I'll be back there sooner or later.
Yeah, I love it there also. I go with a bunch of friends, and I take my little camera, and I'm just interested in the people. And I also didn't go this year.
Were you there just now?
No, I didn't go. We did have tickets, but I chose not to go for obvious reasons. But it's a wonderful thing, isn't it? Because you see all these people who almost behave in completely different ways to how they would normally behave. The day before and the day after, they're in a different world.
No, absolutely. I mean, these great events are all part of the sort of British calendar or English calendar, that I like so much. And that's probably the only one that slipped through the net this year. Right back at the beginning. So you talked about the Hebden Bridge stuff, but how did you first get into photography? Was it, did your father give you a camera? That's that whole story, or is it? No, I mean, we're going to go right way back to when I was a teenager, and I used to stay with my grandfather, who was a very keen amateur photographer, and he gave me a camera. We lent me a camera, went out shooting, processed the film, made prints. So by about the age of 12 or 13, I decided I wanted to be a photographer. I was in Hebden Bridge, 13, 14 years after that. So my photography history goes much further back than the Hebden Bridge work. I'm a very relative newcomer to photography in real terms, 12 or 13 years. But what took you so long, Kevin? I was born and grew up in Newport, and of course the famous
college there, the photojournalism college by David Hearn, and I used to drive past that art school every single day, and never thought about it. In my school, photography wasn't a thing. It was never on the curriculum. It was never anything that was ever mentioned, and that's like a huge, great regret of mine that wasn't put in front of me when I was younger. You were involved with it for a while, I think, were you, in Newport?
I was. I've known David Hearn for many years, and he used to, when I came back from living in Ireland in 1982, just when I was doing the colour work, he used to invite me there to go and do some part-time lecturing. So I got to know him very well, the course very well, and it was the most enjoyable experience.
When you're a member of Magnum, do the commissions come via Magnum? Is everything you do, does that have to go through Magnum, or do you have private commissions?
So any editorial commission has to come through Magnum. Even if someone comes to you direct, we might arrange the terms, we might arrange how to do it, and then Magnum does the billing and take their percentage. All stock sales have to come through Magnum, but with the rest of the things, it's really down to you. If you get the job, like a cultural job at the moment, you can keep all that income. But if you often get jobs like that also through Magnum. So really, and then there are group projects. So it's not exclusive on everything, but on the two key things of stock and editorial, we are.
There's a rich history, and the archive is there, and you have the photographers that are no longer with us, and then you have photographers like yourself and Alex Soth and Bruce Gilden, and you have people like Bruce Gilden who have very, very different style, and people have very different subjectivity about different images and different styles of photography, and I suppose that's the democratic part of Magnum, is the fact that there is so much difference there.
No, I think the variety of photographers you get in Magnum these days is one of our great strengths. We go from photojournalists right the way through to art photographers, and as long as someone's got a vision, a personal vision which they can express through photography, that's what we would be interested in giving someone making someone a nominee, which is the first level of membership. It takes 6 years minimum. So it's a long and laborious process. We have, 350 to 500 people apply every year. And if 2 or 3 get in, that's a big year for us. We only want the very best.
Yeah, no, well, I'm quite right. It makes sense. And, it's held in high esteem for sure. I was doing a presentation in Dubai, actually, and I forgive me now, I can't remember the lady's name, but she was one of the curators for the Magnum online archive. And we got talking about things like Instagram and digital images, and how that will pan out for the industry, not specifically Magnum, but the fact that people can go to Instagram or a website and look at and consume the images long term. Is that a good thing or a bad thing?
I'm all for Instagram. I was a bit slow to use it myself, but if we want to get a message out about anything, Instagram is the most effective way of doing that. I have a Martin Parr Studio Instagram account, which has got over 500,000 people on. And then we also have a very growing and active Martin Parr Foundation Instagram stream. So I think it's a good thing. And ultimately, it's a very democratic process, Instagram, because anyone can start an account. If you're any good, you'll start to pick up followers. But yes, of course, there's a downside to the internet, whereby there's too many mediocre pictures out there. But hey, listen, that's the price. You only know a good picture by seeing bad pictures.
That's a very good quote, actually. Yeah, very good quote. Now, on that, you mentioned your Instagram feed for the foundation, and I was looking at that the other day as well. And you're during this lockdown, you're doing the photo challenges, is it? The Martin Parr photo challenges?
Yeah, we had a very good one this last week about haircuts, which was done a judging for. I think the results will be out either today or tomorrow, and then we'll be announcing the next one.
A lot of people. Right now, specifically with the uncertainty that we have, I think they've got one eye on will people be able to go back to work? Will they be able to commission work? And I think that before this even happened, people were concerned, I suppose, about the value that's put on photography. Now, I don't really mean that in a emotional or a contextual terms, in terms of how you're shooting it, but how are people these days? People make less money and find it much more difficult to make money from good photography.
No, there's no doubt. It's going to be a tough market when we all get back to some kind of normality. It's a very competitive market, photography, as you well know, and some photographers are going to go out of business. There's just not enough work around. Obviously. Things like commercial, editorial, there'll be less money in the budgets. So it's going to be pretty difficult. So, good luck, really. It's not going to be an easy place to survive after this pandemic is over and we get back to sort of what we call the new normal.
What is next for you once we are allowed to go out and play again? What's is there? I think I saw something about a book about Ireland. Is that on the cards?
Yes, we're just finishing that book off. That's looking pretty good. That'll be coming out later in this autumn, and then there'll be an exhibition next February, which starts in Limerick and then travels around Ireland, comes to the foundation before it goes over to Boston.
Now, when it comes to the books, how do you? What's the process of of producing the books? Presumably, you've obviously got full input on it, but does the printing and the binding and is that something that you take full control of, or is it in house at the foundation?
No, I mean this book is being done by Damiani. They're very good people to work with. They always print very well, so it's never a problem with them. We've gone through with a tooth comb the sequence of the pictures, the captions, the text. So everything's been done as a PDF over many mutations, if you like. And now I think we're all set to be printing, and it'll be printing over the summer.
And I think, like with digital photography, when it comes to doing something like a book and you're looking through your contact sheets and you're curating that must be much more difficult now than it used to be, perhaps?
No, because pictures get edited, and if they get onto the Magnum site, then they've already been through 2 processes of editing. So they must have something there, and everything's keyworded. So when I'm putting my book on Ireland together, and I was shooting there last year as well, I just put in the dates, the keywords. I remember some of the pictures, and they all come up. And it's no problem for me to work out which ones are good and which ones are sort of mediocre. So that's basically it. You put in the good ones, you leave out the ones, if in doubt, kick it out, is what I say. I wouldn't let someone else do the editing. I mean, I will work with an editor on a book once that book has been established, and we would check the sequence. They would look at some of the options that I've discounted, etc. And they would also be entitled to look at the work and put in ones that they particularly like. When
we think about the digital world and iPhones and everything else, and literally the amount of images that are being taken, and I actually think that that's not necessarily a bad thing, because whilst there's a lot of pictures that get taken that are not particularly great and may never be kept, I think it is bringing a lot more people towards creativity and photography, if you like.
This is where Instagram is very good, because, I'm not saying the number of likes a picture gets is a sort of guaranteed symbol of how good the picture is, but it often has a big say in, people generally pick out the better ones to like. So it's a very good way of determining what pictures you've taken are actually working with your audience. Yeah. And of course, have a lot of bad pictures, and as I mentioned before, we need all the bad pictures to know the good ones.
In terms of commissions, what if you look back over your career, which commission do you think was the most enjoyable, perhaps?
Oh, that's a tricky one. I mean, I guess I've done quite a few what we call cultural commissions, where you're invited by a gallery to do pictures in a particular place, time, sequence, whatever. So over the years, I've done things like Oxford University. That was fantastic. I did a whole thing on that, the City of London, via the Guildhall in London. They've been very productive, because it gives me a chance fundamentally to work on my own work and someone else pays you. The Black Country I've done with Multistory. So if I'd have had to pick one of those out, that was a commission over a 4-year period, and that produced some really strong pictures. Because, basically, if you spend more time doing it, you're going to get better pictures, and that was the case there. So if I had to pick one, I would choose the Black Country work I did for Multistory. There's a book called Black Country Stories, which is a pretty good book, even though I say so myself, and I feel terrible even saying that.
I tell you, Martin, I have that book, and so I'll be happy to say to people, it's a very good book. So do you ever find yourself sometimes thinking, you know what, today I've got to go and do this commission. I don't really feel like it. Does that ever happen to you, do you think?
Oh, really? I enjoy commissions. I like this idea of solving problems with photography. I find that an exciting process. And of course, if it's a commercial commission, you're being paid very well. So that means that you can, reinvest that money in your own work, put it into the foundation. So there's lots of things to be done. So I'm very happily going to go along, even if it's something that isn't the most brilliant project. I'm still going to enjoy it, because I like this idea of solving problems.
Yeah. No, I think that the foundation is It's still open online, isn't it, right now? So, books and membership and everything. And I'm a member of the foundation, so I'm really looking forward to kind of getting back to Bristol and looking at the exhibitions and the books and everything else that's there. And I think that in terms of the actual foundation itself, when it's just open to the public 6 days a week when it's open, is it
4 days a week. We're just about to change it from Thursday to Sunday, which is the same as the RPS, who are next door to us.
Okay, and it's at Paintworks, right?
It is in Paintworks, near to the centre of Bristol, yeah.
Finally, I suppose, Martin, thanks so much for your time. I would like to ask you, in terms of the people listening, what, is there any kind of advice you can give them? Let's just say they are a 17-year-old Martin Parr. What lessons have you learned, perhaps, and maybe what could you do to encourage them, given the world we live in now, to get up and try and make a living with their cameras?
Well, the first thing you've got to do is identify a subject that has some meaning to you, and then you have to explore that relationship, that actual connection that you have to the subject matter. And if you do that well, then you're going to get good pictures. It's as simple as that, really. So it's finding the right subject, something you care about, and then getting into it and finding the momentum to carry yourself along, and then the good pictures will reveal themselves. I mean, if you want to be a rich photographer, don't try and do things just for the money. You'll never succeed.
Martin Parr talking to Kevin Mullins on the FujiCast. That was great, Kev. Really enjoyed that. I wonder sometimes what Martin's sitters think of Martin Parr. The only reason I think this is because he gets very up close and personal, doesn't he? He works with short focal length lenses, from what I can see a lot of the time. I wonder whether what they're thinking when he's making these pictures of them.
Well, I think if you look at the documentaries on kind of on the Magnum website, and there's also the ones on the BBC, the kind of older ones, where you get a really good understanding of how he works. And so for for some of the ones, he will go up to people and say, "Can I take your picture?" And it's still a kind of really beautiful kind of shot. But for the vast majority of it, it's candid, isn't it? And
I know.
And I love that. I'm looking at some pictures now on the Magnum Foundation of the Cheltenham Festival, and it just makes me laugh. There's this largish lady in bright pink dress, absolutely bright pink dress, with this huge white hat, ploughing into this dusty old cake in a pink box, and it's you see that kind of thing at Cheltenham Festival or various other places in these events that you have, and he said about that, and you don't bat an eyelid, and then when you look at the pictures, you think, oh yeah, that's right, that's exactly how it is. It's amazing. I love it. Love all that stuff.
Can I ask you the sort of question that usually I wince when I hear, but do you have a favourite book of his? What's the Martin Parr? We asked this question a couple of weeks ago. What's the item you'd have to go back in and rescue in a fire? What's the Martin Parr book you would make sure you came out with?
I've got loads. I suppose I would probably go to The Last Resort, just because that's quite iconic.
Yes, it is, isn't it?
And I suppose it's possibly his most famous work, I suppose. Yeah. But yeah, it's the thing about that book is you flick through it and it's just rocked full of nostalgic pictures. You look at them and you think, my God, yeah, I remember the donkeys, I remember the ice creams, I remember the deck chairs and grannies with plasters around their ankles and nobody knows the reason why they're there, all that kind of stuff.
I remember crowded beaches, Kev.
Oh, beaches,
standing in a queue with people to get an ice cream.
We used to be able to touch people?
God, I mean, that's nostalgia in itself. Well, it's an excellent interview. Thanks, Kev. And I'm really pleased that you two hooked up as well, particularly knowing how precious his books are and his work is to you as a photographer and many of other people as well. Don't forget to keep getting your questions in, please. Click at fujicast.co.uk. Recording on Thursday of Ask Andreas Part 2. So any Fuji stuff you want to get in as well for that particular episode. And speak to you tomorrow, Kev.
Bye-bye.
The FujiCast is an independent Loading Zone production.
Goodbye, sweetheart. Well, it's time to go. We're back tomorrow with another show. Well, unless we're fired, we'll talk to you then. Goodbye, sweetheart. Goodbye. Goodbye.